Ladies and gentlemen, it's nice that you're joining us. It really is. I'm sorry it has to be this way, but I haven't been out since Purim, and I'm starting to like this. So I hope all of you are going to have patience, and we're all going to get through this. But until we do, tonight I wanted to discuss the issue at hand. Tonight I want to raise one question and give you the four answers. The one question is, why is the Shabbos Hagadol Drasha different from all other Shabbos Hagadols that we have had in recent years? So here are some of the answers. One is that we're not doing it in person, obviously. And next year, please God, we should all be together in person. The second answer is that you're all on mute. And this has been my dream all my life, that I can say whatever I want and you don't get a chance to say anything. But there's a disadvantage, and that's a third difference. Iris isn't with us. And without Iris participating in my Shabbos Shuva and Shabbos Hagadol Drashas, it just doesn't seem to be the same. And the fourth is that this is not the Shabbos Hagadol Drasha that I had originally planned. I usually do my Shabbos Hagadol Drasha in the slow time in February, and I had prepared one for this Shabbos, but I felt that under the circumstances, there was more important issues to discuss. And so tonight, I want to serve as the defense attorney for the figure who has been most blamed for the coronavirus and who is getting a very bad reputation because of it. And who is that figure? God. Everybody's blaming God for the virus. You can see in your first of the footnotes, I have one of the quotes. Rabbi Yosef Berger, rabbi of King David's tomb on Israel's Mount Zion, claims that the outbreak of the deadly flu-like disease is a reincarnation of the plagues which struck Egypt before the Exodus. He says this is a reincarnation. God brought the 10 plagues. God's bringing this one. Why then 10? And now only one? And why is he bringing the one of the 10 that was unique? The closest thing to what we have now was the 5th plague, which was Dever, pestilence. That was the only plague where you couldn't actually see the hand of God. It was a plague. And so we're left with questions. Then we have others who are giving explanations, all of which blame God. Ralph Drollinger, he leads the weekly study group for the Trump cabinet, and he says God brought this plague because of the homosexuals. Everything gets blamed on the homosexuals. How he makes this association is beyond me. But a rabbi in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Mazuz, who has a school in Bnei Brak, he said that God brought this plague because the homosexuals are violating nature. If that's the case, why is Bnei Brak one of the most afflicted places that's getting the virus, if it's because of the homosexuals? We have Pastor Kenneth Copeland, who says that this is the hand of God, and all you have to do is put your hand on the television, thank Jesus, and say, I take it, I have it, it's mine, I thank you. So I want everyone to take a hold of their computers and see if that works. Do we think this is really God who is doing this? And if we do, then how come a very prominent rabbi in Israel just today sends out a message in the Jewish Journal, where is God during this pandemic? So he's blaming God for not saving us. Others are blaming God for causing it. God gets blamed if you do, and God gets blamed if you don't. So it's a job of Rabbi Mitchell Wohlberg to come to the defense of God. What role does God play in this, if any? So the first point I would make is, sometimes it's hard to believe a plague serves a positive purpose. There is a book called What If? What If is a book which has the world's foremost military historians imagine what might have been. Just like we now have on TV, the plot against America, which is going what might have been. Well, this is a book where military historians go through history and show how history could have been so different if only. What if? The first chapter in the book, written by a professor at the University of Chicago, is called The Plague That Saved Jerusalem. It happened around the year 700 BCE. The Assyrians had surrounded Jerusalem and were about to attack. The Assyrians had captured already 60 cities. They had captured the empires of Egypt and Assyrians and the Phoenicians and whoever. And they were about to capture Judea, Jerusalem. And the night before the attack, you know what happened? There was a plague. According to the Bible, 185,000 soldiers died from this plague. And this military historian says, if not for this plague, the Assyrians would have captured Jerusalem, Judaism would have been destroyed, and there never would have been a Christianity and an Islam as well. All of monotheism might not have existed if not for the plague. So how do we know what God's intention is? And better yet, who says God is responsible? Well, needless to say, there's a strong stream in Judaism that says God is responsible for everything. You can look at number 2, Reb Pinchas of Koretz. He was a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. He writes, a man must know that even a piece of straw lying on the ground facing a particular direction is a result of direct divine providence. If there's a piece of straw on the ground, whichever way it's facing is due to the hand of God. The Ari, who is known as the Ari HaKadosh, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who was basically the source of modern day Kabbalism, he says every leaf contains a soul that came into the world to receive a rectification. Every leaf is there because God wanted it to be there. The Gemara says, from the horns of the, number 4, from the horns of the wild oxen to the tiniest louse, all comes from God. Man does not knock his toe unless it has been decreed so in heaven. And even if one intended to take out 3 coins from his purse and 2 came out instead, nothing is by chance. Everything comes from the hand of God. By a show of hands, how many of you believe that? Rena Poland is one. Bobby K votes no. Let's see. Riedemann, you're a doctor. I'm surprised you feel that way. All right. I see where this is headed. It's not headed in the right direction, folks. But let's see where I'm headed. Look at number 5. Pharaoh took issue with Moses on 3 principles. Moses assumed the existence of a necessary existing first cause, whereas Pharaoh denied it. The second principle Moses laid down was that God watches over the ways of men and measures out reward and punishment. Pharaoh denied that. The third principle Moses asserted was that the provident God was the God of Israel and all-powerful, and Pharaoh denied that. And according to the Abarbanel, each of the plagues, the first 3 proved that there is a God. The next 3 proved that God controls things. And the third is that God can change the nature of things. Very important. God can change the nature of things. There is the laws of nature, but God can change it. And if you look at number 6, in Pirkei Avos, we are told 10 miracles were wrought for our ancestors in Egypt and 10 at the sea. Those 10 were God's hand changing the laws of nature. But other than that, well, even some say not even that. You see, number 7 is a website of a scientist who shows that each of the 10 plagues has a very rational and scientific basis to it. And you know who else says that? My teacher, Rabbi Soloveitchik. Where is his quote? Rabbi Soloveitchik says that we try in every which way not to see God as changing the laws of nature. That God created this world. Here it is, Rabbi Soloveitchik's words. As we read the story of the Exodus from Egypt, we are impressed by the distinct tendency of the Bible to relate the events in natural terms. The frogs came out of the river when the Nile rose. The wind brought the locusts and split the sea. The Bible describes the plagues as naturally as possible. As naturally as possible. Because if we think that everything that goes on in this world is because God ordained it, we can make some terrible mistakes. Look at number 8. The sages taught when the sun is eclipsed, it is a bad omen for the entire world. That whenever there is an eclipse, that's a bad sign for the world. And the second paragraph, the sages taught that on account of 4 matters, the sun is eclipsed. On account of the president of the court who dies and is not eulogized appropriately, the eclipse is a type of eulogy by heaven. On account of a betrothed woman who screamed in the city that she was being raped and there was no one to rescue her. On account of homosexuality, and on account of 2 brothers whose blood was spilled as one. Now, is that why the sun is eclipsed? How many of you think so? Not even Rena Poland thinks this one. But that's what our sages said. That's what they thought in those days, when they thought of everything as being the hand of God and sending a message. The Gemara, number 9, has a similar message. Ravami said, there is no death without sin. There is no suffering without iniquity. That whenever bad things happen, you deserved it. God is punishing you. There is no death without sin. There is no suffering without iniquity. Do you believe that? No. And modern man doesn't believe that. You know when that changed? It started to change in the 17th and 18th century. In the 18th and 19th, really, in the period of the Enlightenment. Let me tell you what happened. Something happened in 1755 that changed thinking. You know what happened? An earthquake hit Lisbon. And it destroyed many of the churches where priests were trying to save the crucifixes to ward off God's wrath. It didn't help. Nearly 100,000 people were killed, many in and fleeing from churches. And to top it all off, it occurred on All Saints' Day. And to add injury to insult, or insult to injury, most every church in Lisbon was destroyed, and all of the brothels in Lisbon's red light district, it was business as usual. How could God allow that to happen? Great minds like Voltaire and Immanuel Kant said, no, there's got to be a different way of understanding these tragedies. And remember number 9, where it said there is no death without sin, there's no suffering without iniquity. But look at number 10. 99% of deaths are the result of negligence. My mother told me, if I went out after I took a shower and my hair was wet, I was going to get pneumonia. It wasn't God's fault. It was completely my fault. 99% of deaths are the result of negligence, won by the hands of heaven. Look at number 11. Rava said, life, children, and sustenance depend not on merit, but on mazel. How long you live, how many children you have, how successful you'll be, does not depend on merit, it depends on mazel. For take Rabbi and Rav Chisda, both were saintly rabbis. One master prayed for rain and it came, the other master prayed for rain and it came. Rav Chisda lived to the age of 92, Rabbi only lived to the age of 40. They both were saintly people. In Rav Chisda's house, there were held 60 marriage feasts. At Rabbi's house, there were 60 bereavements. At Rav Chisda's house, there was the purest wheaten bread for dogs and it went to waste. At Rabbi's house, there was barely bread for human beings, and that is not to be had. Two great rabbis, two saintly rabbis, both of whom prayed to God for rain, and God answered their prayers. Yet, one of them had mazel, and the other did not. And now comes number 12, a very important statement. Suppose a man stole a measure of wheat and went and sowed it in the ground. It is right that it should not grow. Somebody steals wheat and goes and plants it. It shouldn't grow. It's stolen wheat. but the world pursues its natural course. And as for the fools who act wrongly, they will have to render an account. If you are a robber, someday you'll have to pay for it. But the tree you plant is part of nature. Nature follows its own course. Another illustration. Suppose a man has intercourse with his neighbor's wife. It is right that she should not conceive. But the world pursues its natural course. And as for the fools who act wrongly, they will have to render an account. God created the world and wrote 2 books. One is the book of the Torah, and one is the book of nature. And God gave this book of nature to mankind and said, Geh gesunde Heit. This is the way your world is going to run. Don't crap it up. But don't expect me to come running whenever you destroy something. Once in a while, I'll inject myself in nature. I'll cause a 10 plague. I'll make that light of the menorah burn for 8 days. You know what you'll do when I do that? You'll make a yontif, because it's going to happen very rarely. But on day-to-day existence, we live by our hands. Here comes Maimonides, number 13. I do not believe that a leaf falls as a result of divine providence. Not that this spider devours this specific fly as a result of divine decree. I do not believe that when a fish snatches a specific worm floating on a river, that such was the will of God. Rather, this was all through absolute chance, as Aristotle contends. Understand thoroughly my theory that I do not ascribe to God any ignorance of anything or any kind of weakness. God knows what's going on in this world. That doesn't mean he's pulling the strings on everything that's going on, because if he was, we'd have no free will. Next, Nachmanides, Ramban. We follow the Greeks who say that the rainbow appears naturally when the sun shines through moist air instead of as a result of divine intervention. This concept of nature taking care of itself is borne out by the verse, and I placed my rainbow in the cloud. And then he says, we have not found in all of the Torah that God will oversee anything that does not speak. Instead, for such things, he preserves only the principles of science or the natural order of things. The Ralbag. When one understands that evil does not stem from God, it becomes clear that divine providence does not extend to all individual members of the human race. Don't blame God for everything that's going on. Most of what we're experiencing are the laws of nature. Now, here comes 2 very important statements from 2 great philosophers. One, Yehuda Halevi, who wrote the Kuzari. And he says, and I'm going to skip through, the evils that befall are 3 things. When something goes wrong in this world, it's attributable to one of 3 things. The first kind of evil is that which is caused by man by circumstances that he is subject to, genesis and destruction, or that he possesses a body. It is an account of the body that some persons happen to have great deformities or paralysis or some of the organs. If you have diabetes, it's not your fault. If your mother and father had diabetes, chances are you're going to have it. That's one of the reasons why problems happen, because we have a physical body. That's part of nature. Number two, the second class of evils comprises of such evils as people cause to each other. If somebody dies in a war, don't blame that on God. Blame it on the guy who shot him. Blame it on the leaders who started the war. That's not the hand of God. And the third class of evils comprises those which everyone causes to himself by his own actions. This is the largest class. We kill ourselves. If we eat the wrong things, if we don't take care of ourselves, don't blame God. Now, the Rambam says the following. Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry. I just read you the Rambam. I meant to first read you number 18. This is from Yehuda Levi. 3 causes for death. King David, a blessed man, cited 3 different causes for death. He said, God will smite him. This refers to divine cause. Sometimes you die because God says, time's up. Or his day will come and he will die. This refers to natural cause. Certain incidents happen because our bodies respond accordingly. The third, or he will descend on the battle, this refers to incidental cause. You know what this means? That if a plane goes down with 250 people, it wasn't that God had in his plan that each one of those people deserved to die. Maybe one did, and the other 249 got on the wrong plane. And that's what life is all about. And sometimes you miss the flight and you save your life. That's not God. That's traffic. Now, having said all this, let's now look at one more thing. Let me see where my notes are. See, the problem with doing this at home is I just dipped my notes in the ketchup, but bear with me. Now, so why is there a coronavirus? Who's to blame? Don't blame God. I'm going to tell you exactly who to blame. Her name is Wei Guxian. According to Wall Street Journal, she was in one of these wet markets on December 10th in Hualeriawan, China or something. And she was the first person to get the coronavirus, and it spread from her. How did she get the virus? Do you know what a wet market is? Let me read you the description. You've got live animals, so there's feces everywhere. There's blood because of people chopping them up. Wet markets, defined by the Oxford English Dictionary, are places for the sale of fresh meat, fish, and produce. They also sell an array of exotic animals. The Hunan Seafood Wholesale Market, before its closure, advertised dozens of species such as giant salamanders, baby crocodiles, raccoon dogs, And like many other wet markets, the animals in the market live in close proximity as they are tied up and stacked. These markets are wet. Water splashes over the sides of open tubs filled with live sea animals who will be inevitably be killed. Countertops and floors are streaked red with the insides of gutted fish and slaughtered animals' blood, and turtles crawl over each other before their shells are cut off when they are still alive. And you're surprised that a virus started? That's not God's fault. Having told you all of that, we have a statement in the Talmud says, if a man sees that painful sufferings visit him, let him examine his conduct. If things are not going well for you, you should examine your conduct. Now, if you take this literally, it means then you must have done something bad that you're being afflicted. But I don't think it means that any more than when we say, and because of our sins, we were exiled from the land of Israel. We were exiled from the land of Israel because the Romans invaded and beat us up. But whenever something goes wrong, we should sit back a little bit and see what we can learn from this. What lessons are there to be derived from this? Rabbi Soloveitchik says that the whole reason why we experienced the Egyptian affliction was to teach us ethical sensitivity. That once we suffered, we should better understand the suffering of others. Now, it would have been nice if we didn't have to go through 210 years of slavery to learn that lesson. But sometimes when you go through tsaris, you do learn certain things that you might not have been aware of before. I have been in the house now for close to 3 weeks. I really have not left. It gives you a lot of time to think and a lot of time for introspection. I'm not looking at what other people did to cause it, because I don't think they caused it. I don't think I caused it, but I can learn something from it. And there's a lot in our tradition that's worth giving thought to, because the rabbis were pretty smart. They might not have understood all of science, but look at the last quote from the Talmud. If there's an epidemic in the city, gather your feet and stay in your house. What they said 2,000 years ago is just as true today. Please, everybody, we're going to miss seeing you in shul, just as I don't have to tell you I'm going to miss having my children and grandchildren at the Seder. But it's once in a lifetime. And we have to learn from it so that next year at the Seder, we'll appreciate all of them even more. You all take care and be well, and a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, a happy and a kosher Pesach to each and every one of you.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Did you want to field a question or two?
Nah.
Yeah.
Go right ahead. If there's any questions. Bobby K says, change your mezuzahs.
That's important.
You can change them, but don't go around kissing them.
Enter your question in the chat bar if you have a question. We'll relay it to the rabbi.
Somebody wrote, just because you can explain something doesn't make it less of a miracle. That's absolutely true. Even if you say that the Red Sea was because of low tide, it split itself, but that it happened just as the Jews got to the shore, that's a miracle. Any other questions?
Captain America blames everything on his parents.
Captain America blames everything on his parents. Let me tell you something about Captain America. I knew his father. You can't blame your father, man. Everything, don't blame your, and if you think it was your parents, I have a good psychiatrist for you to call. He can work it through. You can work out these issues.
If anybody wants to, who has their camera on that wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand. I'll just unmute you. Physically raise your hand. Okay.
All right. I want to take the opportunity of thanking Rabbi Yogev and Rabbi Posner. You have absolutely no idea the time that they have been putting in to put together all the things that we've been sending out and answering questions, because I spend most of my time spiritually elevated. And so, you know, there are a lot of rabbis who would say that and their congregants wouldn't laugh. Can you believe that?
Everyone looks like they're laughing, like every single person. What's up with that?
All right, you all stay well. And next year, if not in Jerusalem, then in the chapel at Beth Tefillah for the Shabbos Hagadol Drasha. Be well, everyone.
Rabbi, hold on for